What a game the Boston Celtics just had against the Miami Heat, and it really does seem like things are starting to pick up for them after those comments made by Marcus Smart. Ironically, though, Jason Tatum had his worst game points wise at 10 points. Shooting wise, he had his worst game as well, shooting 3 of 13 for 23.1%. His previous worst was on opening night when he shot 23.3%, 7 of 30 against New York. Oh, and by the way, he was 0 of 7 entering into the fourth quarter, and he ended up making 3 of his 6 field goals during that quarter. So it really could have been worse for him. And Celtics had their biggest point differential in this game this season with a point differential of 17. Their previous high was when they played the Orlando Magic just a day ago. And quite honestly, you could tell this was their best defensive two-game stretch from the Celtics. And it just so happened to be right after those comments by Marcus Smart, and they have allowed the Heat to score the least amount of points an opponent has scored on them this season with 78. And their previous low, again, was a night ago with the Magic scoring just over them at 79 points. Now, 6 players were in double figures in that game. You have Horford with his worst game points wise with 10 points, also ties his worst game shooting night at 33%. So well, let's see. You also have Tatum with his worst game, but he had double figures. And then Brown also had his worst game on the road, points wise 17 points, and shooting wise he had 35.7% shooting, which was his worst game shooting wise. Langford, though, he came out big. He had his best game points wise. He had his most minutes in this season, 27 minutes in this game. And Schroeder had the highest plus minus in the game, and that was his highest plus minus this season. Really, so you could really tell, even though Schroeder didn't have his best game stats wise, the minutes he had were very pivotal in them having a double-digit lead throughout the game. And then Aaron Nesmith, man, a lot of people were calling for this guy to play more minutes. Well, he did. He had his best game points wise when he only scored in one other game this season with only 3 points, and this was by far his most minutes this season with 18 minutes. You hope to see more great games like this from Nesmith. It's only up from here, honestly. I think Udoka has been trying to test the waters again, like I said in my previous video talking about the Celtics, and it clearly shows here that giving Nesmith more minutes was very worthwhile. And obviously Pritchard, another player that Celtics fans have wanted to see play more minutes. Well, he only played garbage time in the fourth quarter. Well, he still has that face mask. I think he's still hurting, so I don't blame Udoka for not playing him enough minutes now. I was doubting whether or not Nesmith was going to play well off the bench, and I'm very glad the Celtics are proving me wrong these last 2 games. It's just great to see. The Eastern Conference has been looking way better, and I honestly think at this point it's looking better than the West, but I might do a video on that at some point later on. But now we have to get to the Heat. Let's get into their game, okay? Because they failed to score over 80 points for the first time this season, okay? The Heat have only failed to score under 100 points once previously on the road, okay, before that game. And so this is the only home game when they scored under 100 points. And it was the worst game they've had offensively. It really showed how bad their offense was when the second quarter they only scored 9 points. The lowest points scored by a team in a quarter this season. The first time an NBA team has scored less than 10 points in a quarter. And it's funny because the game before that against Dallas, they had scored the most points in a quarter this season with 46. And it was also a second quarter. It's just funny how things work sometimes, man. 3 players were in double figures in this game. Butler had his worst game at home so far, at least points with 20 points, and his first time shooting under 50% at home. Bam Adebayo had his worst game point wise with 13 points, and Duncan Robinson had bad shooting, just horrible shooting. And it's not his worst shooting. He didn't really have a worst game, but from deep he went 5 of 17, and that was the only shots he took, the shots from deep, and it wasn't going in for him. The rest of the Heat, though, we've seen some anomalies. First time Tyler Hero hadn't scored double figures this season with 6 points, and it was his worst shooting by far, 3 of 11 for 27.3%. This was the first time Kyle Lowry hadn't had a positive plus minus in a game when playing, and it really showed out there. Kyle Lowry was not as impactful as he previously was with the Miami Heat during their big games, during their big wins. And this is a stupid one, but I just thought I'd mention it. PJ Tucker had 2 turnovers this game. If you looked at the previous games he's had this season, the total number of turnovers he's had is 2. So he matched half of his turnovers. It was also his worst game in terms of turnovers. It really isn't a big deal, but I just thought I'd mention it. And this is the last point. I just want to, rub some salt in the Celtics fans' wounds because even though you did win this game, and even though this was your best game, Marcus Smart, He didn't really have a good game. He had the worst plus minus as a starter. He only had 9 points, 1 of 5 from deep. He had 2 assists with 3 turnovers. So, look, Marcus Smart, you can say all the things you want, but you better come out and show how impactful you are as a player and as a passer and just in general as a guard, because I think at some point Udoka is going to take you out of the starting spot and put Dennis Schroeder in permanently. Okay, it's just looking like it's trending that way. And Marcus Smart, man, you really shouldn't have opened your mouth like that, or perhaps you should have. These are the best 2 games you've had as a team, and quite honestly, things might be trending upward. But just know when the next slip up happens, when things go wrong again, they're going to find a scapegoat, and it's not going to be the coach. I have a feeling they're going to find somebody with a much bigger mouth.